Good evening. This is Point Blank at KTN News, here at the INM studios, KTN studios in Nairobi. Martin Luther King Jr. said that the arc of history may be long, but it always bends towards justice. Does it? Jim, we have talked about Kenyatta and his legacy in this decision. Then your brother, his lordship, David Maraga, has inherited the Mutunga court. Does Maraga's court and the men and women that man it and woman it have what it takes to deal with the matters before it? And do they live in the same country we do?
I think they do. At the end of the day, the judiciary can only convict or acquit depending on the evidence that is placed before them and how the case is prosecuted. You can also have a very good case with evidence which is almost insurmountable, but the way the case is presented, requires skills and experience.
Jim, from a technical point of view, just watching the pleas and the beginning of the case, you notice that the judge has to handwrite, he has to take notes from very, very long submissions of very, very able lawyers. Is there something wrong even on a technical level of giving the magistrate the tools where other jurisdictions he would not have to physically write every word?
Yeah, because it's a very difficult process for magistrate actually. You may find one witness in the witness box for days, if not weeks, speaking to the court in terms of giving evidence the whole day, running to the whole week and 2 weeks and 3 weeks, and sometimes even a month. And it's a very, very tiring job. And recording the evidence accurately and almost in the words spoken by the witness is not easy. And therefore, probably we need to give the courts a better environment, better tools, better systems of recording, like in Parliament. Even in the county assemblies, we now have the Hansard. I think we can have better technology, use of technology.
Because, Jim, because in Parliament, I say this because the trial magistrate, the trial judge, are the primary takers of the pleadings, of the submissions. And even appeal will rely on that record. Is it possible for a man or woman of a case of this magnitude, single-handedly, to be able to deal with the likes of the Orengos and the Kirkumis and be able, a battery of top lawyers speaking on major matters of law?
Not easy, not easy. There was a time when probably stenographers were used, but I think now with the technology, I don't think we are well equipped to deal with cases of this magnitude.
For Kenyans to know, when you did the presidential petition, was it the same kind of...
Yeah, it was the same kind of recording. Each judge has to keep a record. But you see, that and a presidential election petition largely is on affidavits and pleadings and submissions which are given orally. And some of those submissions are given in advance. They are filed in advance. Now, if you go to the US, and we used to have a system like that in trials before the High Court, that the record would have gone through a process of preliminary hearing before a magistrate, and by the time the case goes to the High Court for trial, then you have a pretty good sense of the case and how it moves, becomes much more
So
easier.
Jim, is the problem with funding, or is it a problem of admin in terms of...
I don't think
when I was talking to Lady Justice Baraza on Point Blank, she said that when her and Mutunga took office, one of the things they were looking at was to modernize. In fact, IT and ICT was a critical part of modernizing the judiciary. Is this something ongoing? Is it dead in the water? The reform from an admin point of view?
I think it's an objective which has remained unfulfilled. And we need, more than anything else, funding and training.
But Help Kenya, you're an active lawyer.
Yes, yes.
And the law, LSK, yourselves, is there no...
You know, no, the problem is normally the attitude towards the judiciary. I think if we came to the conclusion that the judiciary plays a pivotal role, then in allocating resources to the judiciary, we would be more conscious.
I'm asking you this because if Kenyatta is watching you tonight,
yes,
his job doesn't stop in giving support to Kinoti and Haji. Kenyatta would need, in my view, if his legacy is to be properly fulfilled, to go further and wonder what the judicial arm requires.
Yes.
Because obviously the test of the pudding will be in the judicial...
Yeah, I think at the beginning there was bad blood, if you may like it, you know, if I may put it that way, rather, between the judiciary and the executive, and also elements in Parliament which, you know, were very disdainful of the judiciary. But you know, democracies are normally judged by how the judicial system operates. The law enforcement agencies.
But you know, Jim, this is
yes,
point blank. So what I'm only asking, if Kenyatta is watching you,
yes,
you know, what support can he give as a practitioner?
Yes, and those
in court.
And he's not just watching. When they had the corruption conference some 4 or 5 months ago, which were held, I think, at Bomas, these issues came up. In fact, Chief Justice Maraga attended. So these are critical matters to deal with. And you know, by the way, President Kenyatta has got only 3 years. And the number of cases which are now before the court, I doubt if many of them will be concluded before his term expires. And therefore, he needs to act very fast. And he may need to absorb more people into the judicial system.
Now, Jim, another matter in terms of political strategy I wanted us to deal with is about this idea of turning to state witness, where the prosecutors can do deals with certain witnesses or accused persons in order to get the real big fish, because you were talking here about grand corruption. Yep. Is it now a properly followed prosecutorial strategy to kind of you know, get a thief to catch a thief?
Yes, I think it's inbuilt in the criminal law, and more particularly, you know, the penal code read as together with the criminal procedure code, where you can plea bargain. Now, plea bargaining, at least the way I understand the law as it is in Kenya, cannot result of a declaration of innocence. You could still plea bargain to a lesser offense, or get out with a light sentence, a non-custodial sentence, or such terms as may be agreed between the defense and the prosecution with the approval of the court. But it is not meant, you know, to kind of leave impunity unpunished.
Yeah, but Jim, I'm asking that because just looking at the accused persons now, you're looking at over 25, maybe 28 people, the number of those accused on Tuesday, or arraigned in court on Tuesday. Some were present, some were not. Would it not be better to kind of aim at a certain number, or the real McCoy, and have other people who are prepared to help the state prove its case?
That's what I was saying in the beginning. You know, if you have too many accused persons in one charge, and that charge has got several counts, you know, you can have, like in this one, 27 accused persons, and they are facing the same counts, or some are facing different counts, dissimilar counts, and you have lawyers, 1 or 2 representing, you know, these 30 or so accused persons, and each one of them to address the court during the trial, cross-examine. Now, if you want quick results, you're not going to get in a case like this. And therefore, you know, there are policies out there and judicial opinion expressed on how to frame a charge, and what is the optimum number of counts you can have in a charge, and probably how many accused persons you can have in a charge, so that a trial can be quick but fair. But when you have a trial of 30 people put together and you've got more than 40 counts in a charge, now at the end of the day, you're going to be like some of the cases related to Anglo leasing, which started during the Kibaki first term, Kibaki's first term, and up to now they are not concluded.
Jim, for ordinary Kenyans to know, when you are charged with such enormous crimes, behind the scenes, does the government, with other agencies, including the Central Bank of Kenya, asset recovery, etc., do they have ability, for example, to freeze an account? Do they have an ability to somehow ensure that before the case is over, monies or large sums of money cannot be moved around or hidden, or does this wait for the conclusion of a trial?
No, they have many tools. There are many tools. In fact, when they want to freeze accounts or go and invest into bank accounts, normally they go to court ex parte. They don't need to inform the owner of the account or the operator of the account in advance.
No, ili mwananchi wa kawaida aelewe, what I'm trying to explain, yes. You know, when people think, oh my God, that money has been stolen, yes. And that now it's going to be hidden, it's going to be, by the time this trial is over in 3 years, you can't preserve it. Most people will not know the mechanisms available to government behind the scenes.
In some of these cases, actually, there are instances where the prosecution has frozen the accounts, or the asset recovery unit has frozen accounts while awaiting a trial. So I'm saying those tools are there. Whether the state now, acts in time is another problem.
Well, I don't want to go into, but let me then come to the other issue. There is this issue of Kenya's international treaties and our ability to catch people who commit crimes outside our borders. So particularly like this particular alleged crimes committed on the dam scandal involved companies, international companies contracted to do things in Kenya. Does our law provide for international warrants to be of arrest? Would we, for example, have a treaty with Italy of extradition?
Yes. The law of extradition is there and normally requires our country to enter into an extradition agreement or pact with the opposite party being another state. And Kenya has a lot of extradition treaties.
Jim, the Americans got this drug dealer, El Chapo.
Yeah.
I was telling my friend Gatabaki Ijeho that this is like watching these movies of escapade, because El Chapo was brought all the way from Mexico to face charges in the U.S. through extradition. Yes. I'm just asking, is there the practice in Kenya for this to happen for foreigners who have misappropriated Kenyan money?
No, it's possible. It's possible. And all we need to do is to go to those jurisdictions and make an application. By the way, even those countries do apply for extradition of nationals who have taken refuge in our territory. That happens all the time. There's also normally what is called a mutual assistance agreement, between states. It may not involve actual repatriation of person or extradition, but entail in that other country carrying out investigations on behalf of Kenya, for example, and then giving Kenya the necessary information in relation to any case. And I know we got these pacts with even countries like India. I think within the Commonwealth community, those laws exist. And between territories like Tanzania, Uganda, those laws have been there all the time. You remember during the coup, attempted coup in 1982, those laws were invoked in Tanzania to bring people from Tanzania here.
Back to Kenya.
And I know that Uganda, at some point after the overthrow of the Obote government, they had quite a number of applications here.
But because, Jim, that would be a big deterrent for foreigners to know that the Kenya government will go beyond its borders and get you, request your presence in Kenya. I mean, Americans are very clear about that. Right now in the UK, they have just extradited the bomber of Manchester from Egypt. The brother died during the bombing, Ariana Grande concert, and now has been brought to the UK for trial.
The only thing is that, you know, like between the US and the United Kingdom, for example, those are countries where the question of fairness and judicial processes cannot really be brought into question. But normally you'll find where the death penalty is the punishment spelt out, then you'd find the UK would not send its citizens to the United States. Similarly, sometimes the United States would you know, argue that they have the best judicial system, and all other systems are inferior, and therefore you cannot subject their nationals to a trial in third world. There's some kind of paternalistic thinking from some of these old...
So should the Kenyan judge or magistrate grant the application by the prosecutor for international warrants? It would be very interesting to see whether the countries, host countries, comply with those warrants.
Yes, you know, but they have to generate an application here. The prosecution...
No, they did on Tuesday. Make an application.
Yeah, they generate an application.
Yes.
They have an order which is authenticated.
Yes.
Sometimes the authentication will require the involvement, let's say, for the minister in charge of internal security. Then those papers are registered, let's say, in a court in the United Kingdom. A formal application is made using the state organs in the UK, but of course with Kenya giving the request, making the request. Now, those are tools which I think in the final fight for elimination of grand corruption, we need to invoke, because a lot of times...
Jim, as I move on from this subject, you know I'm asking you, the AKASHAS brothers committed crimes in Kenya involving drugs, and the FBI, and people came all the way, and they were abducted with the cooperation of Kenya government, and now are serving jail time in the US.
In the US,
And I'm only asking you as a lawyer and a legislature whether, in order to deter grand corruption, because most times the grand corruption is aided and abetted by overseas companies and persons, actors, whether that is alive.
The difficulty is that you will find Kenya find it very easy to take the AKASHAS without a judicial process, and then they're taken over to the US. In the US, to get a US citizen to come to Kenya on account of a similar application being made to the United States, you'll have to go through motions.
Well, let's hope that the embassies represented here in Kenya, who have been talking a lot about corruption, can be able to help in that process, because that would be...
And there are some countries which have done better. They claim universal jurisdiction. They can actually prosecute somebody for a crime committed outside the territory of, let's say, the United States or Australia. Like international crimes, there are countries like Australia where you can commit the international crime in Kenya.
You see, Jim, I have to ask you this point blank, because the allegation in this big case, it does not involve a local contractor. All the allegations are around the fact that a contract was done contrary to the provisions of the law, but the actor was a foreigner and a foreign company. So that really, if mega corruption is done in this same way in other cases than this case, unless you deal with the rules.
So let's see how these countries are serious.
Yes.
Yeah, because you know,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, because they are companies and nationals of other countries.
You are a leader in the Senate. You should be there watching you. These foreign ambassadors meet you. I've seen them come to you at the Senate. But now it's their time to stand with Kenya.
That I agree with you. That I agree with you. They should, you know, not just talk, but in fact, they don't have to wait for the Kenya government to take action.
Yes.
They could of themselves, because they know they have good intelligence
because
networks.
This point blank, this company is in Italy.
Yeah, intelligence networks.
You see, this is not Kirinyaga or a company. This is not any local company.
And obviously, you'll find that probably the money landed in Italy.
Yes.
The people concerned are in Italy.
Yes.
Or in the UK.
Yes.
So really, they have to show the Kenyan people
that
they're serious in this war against corruption. Instead of addressing press conferences in Nairobi. You know, sometimes they like doing that.
Yes.
And saying, oh, we are going to deny Kenyan citizens.
And I wanted it here on record on point blank.
Yes.
That really it's not just enough for people to be in court. Yet the real drivers of these corruption syndicates are international, multinationals.
Yes.
Many of them are the ones that hide that money abroad.
In fact, Tony, I agree with you. You'll find that the proceeds of crimes like this, 19 billion, you are probably going to find that money somewhere outside the territory of Kenya in some of those countries. And if they wanted to help us effectively, is to make sure.
So in this case, the government of Italy must be held to account by the president of Kenya through our diplomatic channels. Because it is, I'm sure through their own investigative arms, they can be able to assist.
And also if we do well in our investigations, because sometimes they may be reluctant. But I think if the case is investigated well, and we're able to show two things, that the suspects live in Italy, and there's a basis, a reasonable basis to suspect that they committed these crimes. And thirdly, that the benefits or the proceeds of the crime found their way into
because, Jimmy,
that
it is unacceptable for the president of Kenya to allow somebody to steal 60 billion shillings or 20 billion shillings of poor people's money, Kenyan taxpayer, live a luxury life in Italy or in the UK, and then all of a sudden say that that money has gone.
No, it's obscene. It's obscene.
Yeah, it is incumbent. If the US can follow El Chapo to Mexico, and they can follow AKASHA to Mombasa, Uhuru should take his phone and speak to the Prime Minister of Italy.
Me, at the end of the day, Tony, as much as I agree with you, sometimes when it comes to these matters, the states in the north, and I'm talking about the older democracies, they don't act as they speak out in our territories here, because they've got a lot of tools they can use to make sure, first of all, like, if there are bank accounts out there, and I think to some extent Switzerland has done great in trying to repatriate some of that money that ends up in those banks.
So Jim, as our policeman in the Senate and in the legislature, then you make laws to stop them from winning contracts. We have got to say, if this is going to be the motors apparatus, that they can win and hide, then why do we give them the mega jobs?
Sometimes when you stop it, then they can reply in kind. They can limit to the extent to which you can do business with them. There are a lot more issues involved. But as to what doing right is, I think we can take them on their word and challenge whether they mean what they say.
Jim, as we look back at chapter 6, I did want you to give your voice to whether or not it is the president to act in removing Henry ROTICH and Thuge while the case is going on. You did say it's not tenable, but you did not say that the stepping aside is a legal...
No, as far as I'm concerned, the provisions of the law are self-executing. Every civil servant who is charged with an offense knows that once you have pleaded to the charge, then you must step aside, not in the sense that you have lost your job, but wait until the trial is over.
Orengo, what is...
And to that extent, those who have been charged, not just in the case that found itself in court on Tuesday, but for any other public officials who is charged with an offense, unless it is an independent office or an independent commission, or it is an elective office, which the cabinet secretary is not, which the permanent secretary or principal secretary is not, and all the other officers are not. So the president requiring them to step aside is superfluous because the law is there already.
But when your brother Moses Wetangula refused to step aside initially, Parliament then pronounced itself, and eventually the political mood was such that he did step aside.
Yeah, but Moses, our minister,
yes,
at that time, was an elected member of Parliament. One became a minister by virtue of being a member of Parliament, which is not the case now. So once...
so the buck stops with the executive on the issue?
The buck stops with the executive. Even at that time, he could have been sacked. President Kibaki would have said, I've sacked you. And I think that's the direction we should go. In terms of public officials. One of the, you cannot fight corruption through just prosecution. In fact, the main tool is how we manage public institutions so that there's zero tolerance for corruption. Anybody found, like the Treasury, if the Treasury we made sure that the Treasury works the way they should, And indeed, somebody like the Auditor General, A.D. Oko, should be thanked because he started talking about these things 4 or 5 years ago.
So Bwana Orengo, I've asked you point blank.
Yes.
Kwa sababu ukisikia leo ama kesho, these accused persons wameenda ofisi.
No. That will be contrary to the law. Contrary.
Because nothing has been done well, and if it will be done today, in the day, I would ask what would have happened if somebody goes on Tuesday night. Because, okay, obviously we are talking, these things were happening yesterday.
No.
There had been no resignation by yesterday.
Once resignation now is upon them to make that decision.
Yes.
They can be sacked. May I believe that in terms of the two...
So if they go to the office, are they committing an offense? Mimi nakuuliza hivi tu ili mwananchi wa kawaida ajue. Kama amepelekwa kotini na bado anakataa kutoka arudi kwa ofisi.
It is not an offense as such, but it's unlawful. It's unlawful. There's a distinction between what is an unlawful and what is an offense. And already, knowing the law as it is, there should be somebody.
So can we say that James Orengo is saying at point blank, if you are looking in the eye of Henry Rotich and Dr. Thuge, would you be telling them the right thing to do, the lawful thing to do, is to not be in the office? If the president has not asked them.
Even without the president asking them, they should not be there because they are not, they are not independent officers.
Well, this is point blank here at KTN News at the INM studios here in Nairobi. Mheshimiwa James Orengo believes that once you are charged in court, you should not be in the office until your case is determined. This is
in fact, you're interdicted.
And interdicted. You're watching KTN News.